opinion on defund the police. What is like your interpretation of the movement, I guess? And do you think that in its current form, as it's like kind of projected by the media, like is that effective, or do you think that it's kind of skewed depending on where you look?
I think there's a huge problem with the concept of defund the police, and the problem is in the terminology itself. And the reason for that is because it means almost nothing, therefore it means almost anything to whoever's trying to interpret it. To most people, I would imagine that defund the police means to, willy-nilly remove all funding to one of the most important social and political structures we have in our society. And people are scared about that. But that's not what defund the police from, I think, a more informed perspective means. To defund the police, and it's a bad term, but what sober, rational, and critical people think defund means is to take another look at the huge amount of funding that municipal police departments get around the country, to the tunes of billions of dollars in places like LA and New York, and saying, is there a portion of that budget that could be reallocated to services that not only the public wants, not in the form of policing, but that police also want. Police don't want to respond to calls for a cat stuck in a tree and a weird guy walking in a parking lot. Police themselves, in the book by Alex Vitale called The End of Policing, he quotes them as saying, we don't want to do all of the things the society is charging us to do. So if defunding means, all right, we're going to take a really small proportion, even though a small proportion still comes out to millions of dollars, we're going to take a small proportion of your in the case of New York, $12 billion budget, and instead of having a police officer respond to a 15-year-old in his or her bedroom who won't come out and may be suicidal, have a mental health expert respond. And if that's what defund means, then I think far more people would be interested in it.
There's definitely a lot to unpack there. But going back to what you said at the beginning about kind of the idea that most people that are sober-minded, informed, whatever, would you say that like the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, like the most recent one that happened 2020, COVID, would you say that the average person attending those protests, and let's say either like peaceful or not, just like the average person, do you think that is their idea of defund the police, or do you think that they're there for, say, alternate motives, different reasons?
I mean, if the question is, did people showing up to mass protests in the past, let's say the year or so leading up to COVID and during COVID, were they motivated by any one thing in particular? The answer is definitely going to be no, because I don't think any mass protest movement throughout human history has had a singular objective. Rather, it's usually a sign of kind of a general discontent, even among people who are not able to articulate what their discontent might be.
Really?
Sometimes I think people are motivated by hunger, outrage, hatred, whatever it is.
COVID.
COVID. It could be many things. But is there always a percentage of people who show up to a semi-organized protest who very much intellectualize or understand what they're speaking truth to, for example? I think the answer is yes. So, for every 100 people at a protest, I would say 90 are just generally discontent with a current situation. It's a vague statement, but I mean it to be. 10 people are doing it just because it's happening and it's fun. And then of the 90 people who are discontent, I would say about, depending on the protest, about a quarter of those people would be really good at articulating exactly what it is they're trying to accomplish. But I think that's the case with any protest, from the left side of the political spectrum, the right side of the political spectrum. Whether you're going into the Capitol on January 6th to setting a police office in Minneapolis on fire, I think there's always, some are just doing it because discontent, but some are actually doing it because they have an ideology supporting their actions.
Right. Well, so if that's the case with protests, if you only have a small percentage of people that are actually attending these protests that know what they're actually protesting, does it make sense to even address the problems that are being brought up in the protest if most of the people there are there for reasons that are not, like
Intellectualized.
actually Black
Yeah.
Lives Matter, or actually defund the police, then it's like, do we really need to address these? Because most of these people are just pissed off for like kind of their own separate reasons.
Well, that's a good point, but I think that in many ways you should and you can and should take into consideration a general discontent. So, for example, if a whole bunch of babies show up to your front lawn and they're all crying because they're hungry because food ran out, you wouldn't dismiss it and being like, oh, they don't know what they're talking about. They're babies who don't know why they're crying.
Right.
The fact is they're on your front lawn because they're hungry. So if you showed up to the Capitol on January 6th because you have a general unease with the way you think the government is working, but you can't articulate it, I think that's valid. And if on the left side of the political spectrum, if you're showing up in front of a police station in Minneapolis after the killing of George Floyd, and you may not be able to articulate the issue or even have the data to prove what you think is going on in the world, just the fact that you're there is symbolic of something that needs to be
addressed.
Yeah, so I think that showing up needs to be taken seriously. Waiting for people to cogently articulate why they showed up, you're going to be waiting a long time. Because most people don't know why the hell they're doing whatever they're doing in life. Yeah. And that doesn't dismiss them, but that's a different form of understanding.
And then, so how should that be addressed then? If it's a little vague and like, let's say there's just, I mean like for example, like there's problems like all over the spectrum, like poverty, and then like, you know, there are the actual issues being addressed by the, like how should the state go about dealing with those issues?
You know, that's where I run into a problem. I don't have many answers because I don't trust or even know how to rely on formal structures to address general discontent among people.
Okay.
So what I would say is if people are pissed and people are coming into the streets believing that they're, you know, motivated by some event or general feeling of discontent, who and how should we respond to that? I think it's not a governmental issue. Like, let's have a working group and a committee and policies to address these things. I don't have faith in that kind of stuff.
Really?
But do I think that it should inspire smart people having conversations to try to figure out why are there, 10,000 young people on the streets of Minneapolis who aren't going to sleep to go to school in the morning, who aren't going to work in the morning, who aren't being told to stay home by their parents, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
It's not that they're wrong for showing up. It's that why are there not formal and informal social structures keeping them at home? That needs to be addressed. And who are those smart people? Teachers, parents, religious figures, politicians. It's a lot of different people in a conversation. But should the government just organize a committee to address discontent? No.
But the eventual end goal of those, social, like actual citizens and not people, the eventual goal is to get the government to change something like an underlying issue that needs to be addressed.
Wrongly
right?
so, I think, though. I think when you're out on the street to protest something that is not legal, it's as the court system proved. Let's take the case of George Floyd.
Right.
The court system showed officially that it was not right what that police officer did and charged him and sentenced him for murder.
Yeah.
So if you're going out on the street to get the government to declare that what is already extra legal or wrong is more wrong, it's kind of a waste of your time. I think what protest is actually doing is creating general awareness. It's not asking the government to come in with a policy decision. So when people are saying, hey, government, make our lives better, I think that's the wrong thing to be doing. I have more of kind of an anarchist philosophy. The other end of the spectrum, you kind of a libertarian philosophy, where like you're not out on the street begging the government to fix the problems. You're begging society to listen and to be more thoughtful about problem solving in various ways, from K through 12 schooling all the way up to the White House.
But does that really address the issue? It kind of just, I mean, you are spreading awareness,
which is powerful. I think awareness is powerful. Getting people's aunts and uncles to take a second before spouting off political ideas about police brutality, for example,
Yeah.
that in that second is thoughtfulness. And I think that has revolutionary power. But going out on the street just to get a politician to sign a document to change your life is never going to happen.
Yeah.
It'll happen over time, but there's no policy document that says police officers shall not engage in the extra legal killing of people, because guess what? That's already illegal.
Right.
So yeah, police officers shouldn't do that. We know that. I think it's a cultural change that needs to happen.
What about
change.
like you were saying earlier though, with like different allocation of resources like tax dollars, and also just like better training, right? Like,
that's a good point. That is a way for local government, not federal government or even state government,
really?
To say, where should we put our money? Where should we put our money that will provide services that we think the people actually want or need, even if they can't articulate it? So that is policy decision making that is good. And if local politicians, even state and federal too, of course, but if local politicians can respond to general discontent in a way that says, we think, because we're smart people, and we think that if we allocate this money to trained healthcare professionals, it will make society better, and people believe it makes society better, well then you're making society better.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of perception. And hopefully it's a matter of objective change. But sometimes it's just a matter of perception. Do people think you're making society better by engaging in these actions as a response to people's discontent? I think the answer is yes. Because things are symbolic as well as objective.
Right, okay. But should with an issue like the police training kind of thing, like wouldn't it make sense to kind of legislate something like that where there's protests happening on a national level? Shouldn't it be kind of legislated on a national level? And because you can make the argument that state government and local government could deal with pretty much every issue because they know their local areas better. But it's I think personally it's hard for like them to tackle. A lot of it kind of varies from state to state. Some are understaffed, and there's also different education levels, whatever. I mean, you'd like to think that every local government wants what's best for their local community, but I don't know, at some point I think it is like with these broader issues it does make sense to kind of maybe leave it up to like a more larger governmental body.
I agree that sometimes you do have to leave it up to the broader, more powerful, like federal government, for example. But and maybe this is just showing my ignorance. I always wonder, what are they going to do? What is the legislature, the executive branch, and the judicial branch going to do in the short term to make people feel, erroneously or not, that they are being less harmed by local police? So are people being harmed by local police? Sure. Do people perceive that they are being disproportionately harmed by local police? Yes, some people do. What are the three branches of the federal government going to do tomorrow to make people feel differently or perceive things differently? Now, I'm not saying that the three branches of government have no role. I mean the short term.
Yeah.
What in the short term is President Biden or President Trump going to do? Maybe it's my ignorance, but I have little faith that that's where things take place.
Right.
In the short term.
Well, I mean, I'd say even like you're saying, like installing committees that monitor over these things and make sure that assets are allocated effectively. And then for that problem specifically, like just make mandatory training. I know police officers, this is like kind of like the national mandate right now is you need to have, I think it's between 2 to 4 hours of combat training, like a year, or intense
like combat equivalent.
Yeah, like
training
intense
in the
situational. Like that's like extremely low in comparison to like let's say like military or like anything else.
Fine.
Which I think that could definitely be. I mean, that's just like a tangible thing where it's like bump it up, like
Well, I mean, I think that, if I was in charge right now of police, I really believe this is what I would say. I would say that if you're going to be the front line of the government, which is what the police are, the front line of the government, and you're going to enforce laws, and you're also going to engage in policing with the power of arrest and the power and the charge to defend the Constitution with a badge and a gun, you should have to have at least a 2-year degree. But here's why I mean.
Really?
Yes, but here's why. Not because a degree makes you smarter, not because a community college degree or a 4-year degree makes you a more wonderful person, but what it does is it provides the time and space of someone's life to both kind of grow up, mature, all humans mature, but it also just exposes you to a slightly broader range of ideas and people. I don't think that you should be able, and this is an extreme example, hopefully this doesn't happen, but actually it does. Should you be able to grow up in Simi Valley, California, with people that look and act and have every demographic feature that is similar to your own,
right?
Graduate from high school, go to the police academy, and by the age of 21, all of a sudden be assigned to police Boyle Heights, 42 or 38 miles away in LA.
Okay.
I think no, not because you're a bad person, but because, simply put, you haven't been exposed to, and I mean this literally, a sociology class, hell, a business class, a math class. You haven't had time to bake, and I think that makes you more similar to a robot than a human. Because literally, the prefrontal lobe isn't as developed. You are almost literally closer to a baby than you are an adult. So again, it's not that degrees make you smarter. It's that it's at the time and space of the degree makes you more worldly, let's say. Now, what could take the place of that? This might sound more controversial to more kind of left-wing people. And that is, if you are in the military, it would take the place of a degree. Not because I think military training makes you a better warrior. I actually don't. I think being in the military is a lot like being in college.
It's very diverse. It's a lot of different perspectives.
Very diverse.
That is,
It is so diverse. So I think a 2-year degree, if not a 4-year degree, or time in the military. Again, not because it's training you for combat. It's training you to interact with human beings.
And if this was a bill that was proposed, you would vote for it.
I would write the damn thing.
Where would would we provide scholarships? Because it's another thing is being a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do make it's a decent salary.
Very decent.
But you do. I mean, 2 years of college that can be expensive. And also you were saying, the situation where it's you're 35 miles out from LA, you're in a predominantly white community. Mm-hmm. What's stopping you from just going to the community college in that community with the same people you went to high school with or whatever? For 2 years, and then in general you're taking general education courses anyway. So you could take psychology, whatever. I don't. But I mean, most of those courses are also available in high school. Mm-hmm. And the difference between 18 and 20, I'm pretty sure your prefrontal lobe is it'll be a little more developed, but it's still you're not an adult yet. So I mean, you're kind of being nitpicky, and it's definitely going to vary from person to person.
I mean, a little more baking, a little more exposure, because community college is going to expose you to just more people, more ideas. A little bit of baking. A 15-minute brownie and a 17-minute brownie are very different desserts. They really are. And a little bit more baking is more. And I would say this. Let's say I am in charge. I haven't really thought about this too much. But let's say I'm in charge. I think that if you decide, if you dedicate yourself to public service as a nurse, a teacher, or police officer, and society starts to recognize policing as a public service because it's attracting more thoughtful, educated people, then guess what? Pay nurses, teachers, and police officers education to go into public service. Simple as that. But right now, I don't think society wants to pay anything for police officers because they see them as uneducated brutes who are out there to pick on people rather than out there to provide service. I think a lot of people think that. Whether or not it's right is open for debate, but I think a lot of people do think that. But if you could say, wait a minute, police officers are going to be more educated, they're going to be a couple of years older, and they're going to be a little more exposed, and we're going to pay for their education so they could give back in the form of public service, like other people who respond when you call 911, I think you have more support, and I think cops would be better.
Do you think that having a mandatory 2 years of, say, education, or even the military, could be detrimental because you just have these people that go to college, explore, you have to take general eds. They find a different subject they're more interested in, and then they just decide to not be a police officer. Or they join the military, and then they decide to go become an officer. They're that pays better. And there's this negative connotation around cops already. How would we... like if we're gonna like add hoops to jump through, how do we keep incentivizing people to want to become police officers?
Yeah.
And because you need that first push of people that are gonna join, that are gonna be more educated, that are actually gonna like shift the narrative, and you like from where it is right now. I mean, being a police officer is already like not. Like nobody really wants to do that right now.
I think they should want. I think it could be an awesome job. And I see your point about hoops jumping through. Right now, the biggest hoop to jump through, which is why you're having retention problems and recruiting problems, is that one of the big humps to jump through is the hoop of, wow, everyone thinks that we're racist, ignorant brutes.
Yeah.
That's hard to attract people when there's the perception, valid or not, doesn't matter. If there's the perception that you're a racist, ignorant brute, it's hard to be like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to be a cop. But if you're like, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to be a cop, it relies on more education. My education is going to be funded. I'm thoughtful. And policing has been defunded. So I'm not out there like giving Narcan to homeless dudes in alleys.
Okay.
Instead, that is healthcare professionals.
Right.
I think it could be a more respected, esteemed, and fulfilling career.
Okay.
I really do think that.
Yeah. Going back to what you said about, a lot of people have this, policemen are, racist brutes, whatever. Like,
that's a
I agree.
perception
of course,
some,
like, and there are, but for me personally, my experience with police officers, I've never had like a really bad experience. Mm-hmm. But I do acknowledge that. With the addition of social media, it really does highlight the that there are people that like there are bad police officers out there, like in the George Floyd instance, for example.
Yeah, fine.
How is the college like I think people that want to be good police officers are going to be good police officers regardless if they get a college degree or not, and those people may be more prone to making better decisions in the future with this addition, I agree. Mm-hmm. But the people that want to be police officers, that are bad people, that are doing it because, they have an ego and it's kind of a power trip and they like that idea, those people are going to keep doing that regardless. And I don't think that this solution would be effective at stopping those people, which are the main problem.
I feel like education, again, it's the time and space of education. It's not actually what you're learning. What you're learning is secondary to the process. I think the process of learning kind of chills people out a little bit. I think it makes them more thoughtful. And I also don't think, by the way, that just objectively bad people become police officers to do objectively bad things.
Really?
I really don't. I don't think, because here's why. I don't think objectively bad people go into anything to be objectively bad. Those are called like sociopathic serial killers. But I have a pretty rosy view of humanity. I think that people act bad. Sometimes people are worse than other people. Yeah. But overall, all people are trying to kind of do what they believe is right and is helpful to their vision of the world, even if it's evil sometimes. I just think that people are more good than they are bad, and people overwhelmingly do more good things than they do bad things. Right. Police officers, political leaders, homeless people, gang members, all people, I think, tend toward good versus bad. And I think what backs that up is that we have never in the history of humanity been less violent and safer than we are at this very second.
That is true.
We're a pretty compassionate people. People don't go around kicking babies in the face.
Yeah.
We just don't as a species. Right. And if that's the bar, the lowest bar, that we don't kick babies in the face, well then we're starting from a pretty awesome point where we're pretty good. Yeah. And I don't mean to sound naive in how optimistic I am, but I think people are pretty good. And by the way, to go back to police officers, it's not about police officers getting an education in order to be taught to be better people or anything. I think it's that if police officers get an education and more exposure, there's a greater perception in the general public that police officers are better and more thoughtful. So right now, for example, you ask the typical person on the street or student, what's a big threat to University of Arizona students?
Yeah.
Overwhelmingly, they say gang members. Gang members on the south side of Tucson.
Right.
There are no gang members. Gangs exist in tiny little pockets throughout
it's like a
Tucson,
block.
and there is virtually zero violent crime against University of Arizona students by gang members.
Yep.
So there's this perception, though, that there are these people out there lurking and they're gang members. And the racial component is that they're predominantly people of color, Latino or Black.
Okay.
The facts, though, is that a white female, for example, is far more likely to be preyed upon and sexually assaulted or even physically assaulted, violent crime, by a male that shares her demographic background and has the same class background. So my point is this, is that we tend to make ghosts out of people that we think are not part of our civil society. Yeah. Well, that also extends to police officers. As many people are out there that think gang members are preying upon us, there's also a lot of people out there that think police officers are preying upon us.
Yeah.
They're both wrong. In fact, gangs, you know what gang members do? They play video games and they smoke weed and they go and buy bread at the store for their kids. You know what police officers do? I was at the gang unit in LA. I was embedded with the gang unit. Wow. And between home entries, we would all 15 of us would all go to the 7-Eleven between calls. Right. And they would talk about Adam Sandler movies. They wouldn't talk about how do we be racist? They talk about Adam Sandler movies. So that's the point, is that people are humans. The point is to get people to respect them more. Right. And I think more education, more time, and more experience, such as working in not just the military, but even a hospital, will get people to say, oh, maybe they're not just these ignorant, racist brutes. Yeah. I think it's perception.
And I do like the idea, but again, like you were kind of saying before, like with the gang member thing, it is it is perception, and I'd like to think that most cops are already good people, even without what's it called.
Most people are already good people. Most people are already,
including cops. But there's still going to be how do we solve the issue of police officers that do bad things occasionally, that get caught on social media and then switch the whole perception, because that's the issue. And it's the same with the gang member thing. A lot of it is it's provoked by social media, and before social media it was the news, because bad things sell. Nobody wants to read about good stuff happening.
I mean, I think one of the ways that you get rid of cops who do objectively bad things is you have the wherewithal and the power in the leadership of police departments as well as the government to say that, we're not just going to support police because they're heroes who save our lives. We're going to treat them like the human beings they are. We're going to hold them to a high standard. We're not going to let their union cover things up. And we're also not going to engage in this hero worship where if a police officer does something atrocious, that a bunch of people aren't going to come to their defense because they have a hard job. They have a violent job. Oh, stop it. No, they don't, by the way. They have as hard a job as anyone else in America, and it's not one of the most dangerous jobs. Statistically, it is not even in the top 20 of dangerous jobs.
Really?
And in fact, the fewest number of police officers in American history, going back to about 1868, when police became formalized in the United States, the fewest number of police officers killed in the line of duty was in every year of the Obama administration. And we are still at the lowest number that police officers being killed in the line of duty going back to World War II. The most police officers that were killed in the line of duty was from 1930 backwards. 1909 was one of the bloodiest years. 1929, 1930. So my point is that police work is getting safer and safer every year. And by the way, this isn't some weird conspiratorial left-wing blog who says this. This is the Police Down memorial page themselves who point this out. Police officers are relative to previous generations of police far safer than they've ever been.
I think in general society is much safer than it was.
There's
back in 1929 when the Great Depression was happening and everyone was scavenging for food.
Well, the 1930, the reason the most police officers died in line of duty was in the context of prohibition. It was police officers making contact with people who were selling or making alcohol. But you're totally right. Police officers are less likely to be killed in line of duty, but people are far less likely to be killed on the streets.
In general.
I mean, just for example, in 1991 and 1992, in the city of Los Angeles that had a population of 3.5 million people, there were over 1,000 homicides a year. In fact, there was 1,091 homicides a year, exactly 2 years in a row, in a population of 3.5 million. The city of Los Angeles, in the past 20 years, is hovering at around 4 million people. So the population's a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
And there haven't been more than 300 homicides all but a few years.
Okay.
Look at that difference.
Yeah.
We are a safer society, and police are safer as well.
Yeah.
I'm not saying what that's attributable to. What I'm saying is like the rhetoric of heroes and villains and police and racists, I think all needs to be brought down to reality. And individuals need to be judged on individual actions, and perception change will actually allow people to realize whether they're dealing with gang members or police officers, they're actually a lot safer than they think.
Okay.
And I'm not trying to erase people's legitimate fears, but do I think that police officers drive around and are any way consciously disproportionately violent towards black males? I actually don't.
But some of them do.
Hell yeah. But in the same way, do I think that there are gang members driving around disproportionately trying to attack innocent people as part of a gang initiation? No, that's urban folklore.
Yeah.
My point is this, though. Is there a perception that police disproportionately act violently against men of color? Yes, there is that perception.
Yeah.
Is there an implicit bias that manifests as a disproportionate arresting or searching of men of color as well as brutal force? The answer is actually yes.
Yeah, well,
so you see, you can have two things be right at the same time.
Again, this is like a deeper underlying issue, but in general, there's more crime in like inner city areas that are predominantly black.
Yeah. But police officers don't stop crime. Police officers respond to crime.
Yeah.
The idea that police officers are out there like jumping in the way of violence is not true.
No, they respond to crime, and in general, the crime is in these areas that are predominantly black. So they do develop a predisposition to kind of it's like you learn it. It's like they've been in these situations a lot, so they are going to presume the dude with his pants sagging and a little like he's probably like more likely to be like a suspect than Jack walking down the street in like his Birkenstocks.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And you know what? That police officer is going to be right a lot of the time, but when they're wrong, that is a civil liberties constitutional violation, and they should be held to a higher standard. That even if you're right, a lot of the time, based on your training, perception, expertise, you're not allowed to be as wrong as you are, cops, because you're wrong too often. So we're kind of asking police to be pretty special professionals.
Non-biased.
And I think, not just non-biased, no one can be really non-biased. I'm saying we're asking police officers to be pretty savvy, base their perception on intellect as well as experience. Well, you know where you learn some of that? Higher education. I really believe you learn some of that in higher education. Or, by the way, when I said police officers also going to the military, I think police officers who go to the military are more worldly and actually are a lot chiller. I also think that if you work in an ER, that should take the place of a 2-year degree. I think any kind of public service,
anything for 2 years before, you can't just go from high school to being a cop. That's what you're saying.
Anything that exposes you formally to working with people.
What about being like a waiter at a restaurant?
No, because that's not public service. It's dealing with the public. It's not public service. I think it should be military, hospitals, teaching. But teaching, you need a degree. Hospitals, you need a degree. Military, you don't, but that's a little different. Yeah. I think that you should have to work in some capacity that is of service to people, but not in a for-profit industry.
Yeah. I like the military idea, but I will say I'm pretty sure it's difficult to get a 2-year term with the military in general.
Oh no, well, whatever their term is would be the equivalent, is what I'm saying. If you serve 4 years in basic training, whatever, and then you want to go to the police force, I think that that would be better than somebody who went to high school, kind of flunked out of community college, was working at Subway sandwiches, got in some fights, blah, blah, and then all of a sudden, I'm going to be a cop. Now, those people can be very competent and kind, but that's not the point. The point is a formal education and exposure.
Yeah.
I think just makes you better in whatever you do. Whatever you do, that's going to make you a better person. Not a better person, I shouldn't say that. It's going to make you a more educated, responsive person. I don't know if it'll make you a better person. I know a lot of really wonderful people who have no formal education and in fact spent most of their life in prison. I know a guy who spent most of his life in prison who I swear to you, I'm not trying to be nice, if I had to have a babysitter for my kids, I'd pick him almost over anyone. So sometimes it just, you just don't know.
Yeah.
One point I want to point out, and you could, put this wherever you want.
Yeah.
But that is a key thing going back to the idea of defunding. And this is an absolute fact. I have the data at my fingertips. Every single municipal police force in America, LA, Seattle, San Francisco, Austin, New York, Boston, Minneapolis, is, as of right now, has the largest budget in their history. So, if the idea that the police have been defunded is going around, it is objectively false. No police force in America is not at their all-time highest.
I think that information is a little misleading, though.
No, I don't.
You have
this
inflation,
isn't from a blog.
and people are also the population's larger. So of course, there's going to be a larger sum of money allocated to the police than there was, back in the '80s when gas was $2.
Well, no, right? Yeah, you could measure it however you want. The fact is that if defunding is measured as less money and there's more money, and Minneapolis doesn't have millions of more people than it did 5 years ago. Right. I'm talking about in the context of this notion of defunding. Yeah. If we're measuring defunding by dollars, well then there is no defunding, and in fact, every police budget is biggest that it's ever been.
But I don't think we need to measure it by value, and I haven't looked at the
well, it depends on what you mean by value. And I'm not comparing today's monies to 1970. Yeah. I'm comparing today's monies to 2019 when the defunding effort came on board. Now, did some police departments quote-unquote defund and drop down in 2020? Yes. Austin is the most famous one.
Really?
It dropped down by 2%. Okay. Is every police department have their largest budget in the history of their budgets as of 2023 because they project it? Okay. The answer is yes.
All right.
Not one police department in America is, if you're counting money, which is how you count defunding, not one police department in America is defunded.
So, in fact, most of the departments they've solved the issue by increasing funding. Do you think that increasing the funding, do you think that is going to help solve or mitigate the problems, or do you think that they still need to implement the 2-year get an education or get some?
Oh, that's just us being aspirational. It's not going to happen at all. Okay. But do I think that that more money is going to help? No, because I don't think more money for anyone is going to help, including, and now I'm going to sound really controversial, public education. I don't think more money helps anything.
Really?
I think the right amount of money helps.
Okay.
So do I think more money for police keeps people safer?
Yeah.
Definitely no, and there is no data to support that more money keeps people safer. In fact, and this is correlation, not causation, I can show you, going back 100 years, that more money actually increases crime. Now, I don't believe it increases crime.
Really?
But in the context of higher budgets, you actually have higher crime rates. Now, that's correlation, not causation.
Right.
But you can make any argument you want. But no one can make the argument that more money keeps people safer. Because if you try to make that argument, I could make a very thoughtful argument that more money keeps people less safe. Both of those statements are wrong. They're both wrong. What happens is that budgets largely have not much to do with the crime rate. And no criminologist or even law enforcement official in America will say that the crime rate is directly linked to budgets.
Well,
because
it's not,
no one would make
but
that
larger
case.
budgets give you the they give you the power to mitigate the effects of larger crime at a certain point in history.
The effect.
Right.
I think larger budgets in the school system and public health mitigate the effects of crime more than larger budgets of police forces mitigate the effects of crime, because the effects of crime are seen more in educational and healthcare spaces and also housing spaces. Okay. So if you're talking about mitigating the effects of crime, well then definitely
allocate it to other spaces.
Yeah, and again, if defunding means taking some of those resources that top no part of our government is as well funded in a municipal level than police by 20 times. So if you could take some of that and put that in other places that help mitigate the negative effects of crime as well as policing, I think that's better for society. Giving more money to bloated police budgets, I don't believe is doing anything other than affording them the privileges of fancy cars, fancy equipment, and more personnel.
And I agree with that.
And in fact, it's not a political issue. How is it that more right right-wing or even libertarian people, as well as left-wing, more anarchist people, how are they not in total agreement that the amount of money we give to the police constitutes a huge welfare grab from the right-wing perspective or a huge bloated bureaucracy from the left-wing perspective? They don't agree, but they actually should agree that that's a lot of money going to a governmental agency. How is it the libertarians are okay with that? How is it that the left is okay with that? I think everyone should be like, wait a minute. Let's see what service you're providing and how much you need to provide that service. Because right now, $12 billion, if I'm not mistaken, for the NYPD, to me, sounds like a joke. It just sounds like a joke to me.
Yeah.
So defunding is not what people think it is my point.
It's like reallocation.
It's reallocation. But also, if you're measuring defunding by dollars, which is how you measure defunding, there's no defunding going on at all. In fact, to the chagrin of the left, sorry leftists, no one defunded the police, no matter how much you protested.
Yeah.
In fact, the police have more than they've ever had.
Right.
So the left should be pretty pissed. But instead, what you see in social media or the mainstream media is the right being pissed that the police are being defunded.
Yeah.
No, right? There are police supporters.
Yeah.
The police are not being defunded. The only people in this, the only
yeah.
political people in this scenario who should be pissed are the leftists who went out onto the streets and yelling for defunding.
Yeah.
They're the only ones who should be mad because they lost. The right, if you're talking binary, it's not really like that.
Okay.
But if we're talking about left versus right, and if we're saying that the right is pro-police, bigger budgets, guess what? They won. So stop complaining, right wing. You know?
Yeah, that does make sense. That is kind of funny. We could start wrapping up. I mean, so generally, you think the realistic solution would be reallocation.
The solution to like the perceptual
the solution
problems?
to just both the perceptual problems and the underlying issues like the police brutality, whatever.
More education, because I think that the time and space of education makes people. Here's the big takeaway. The time and space of education in a variety of ways, whether it's because you do intramural soccer or you take physics, I don't care. But the time and space, I think, allows you to take a deep breath and de-escalate a potentially violent situation to a greater degree than somebody who hasn't played intramural soccer or taken a physics class.
Okay.
I really do believe that being around more people for a longer period of time makes you a more reasonable human being. I really believe that.
And I do agree with you on that. Do you think that something like a mandate like that, do you think it would gain like a lot of support, especially from people that actually want to become police? Like if I want to be a cop, like, to be frank, I'd probably get a little bit annoyed if somebody was like, "Well, you go to 2 years of post-secondary." I'd be like, "No, I don't want to play intramural soccer." I
know what you mean. Yeah. Well, I would say, I would ask the same question of someone else who has big responsibility in a chaotic working environment that helps save lives. Nurses. Imagine if we told nurses, you know what, nurses, you seem annoyed by that nursing education you have to get. We think you should be able to come right out of high school and start nursing. You're like, well, no, they need to learn skills. So in a way, saying that police officers need more education, I think it's respectful of police. It's like there's a lot to learn. And we, the government, the federal government, are going to pay your education. And when you come out, we're also going to make your salary increased.
Right.
So I think that if there was like a national push to say police officers are going to be more educated on our dime and they're going to make more and there's going to be more respect for them as public servants, I think everyone would agree with that. And if anyone's like, no, I just want to get in there tomorrow.
That makes sense.
Tough. You can't be a nurse tomorrow. You can't be a teacher tomorrow.
Yep.
You can't be anything tomorrow except for like a ditch digger.
Yeah.
You know?
Or a cop.
And you see the point? That's a great point.
Yeah.
Right now, ditch diggers and cops have about the same path to their profession.
Yeah.
I mean, cops have more because they have the academy.
Yeah, I mean, how long is that? Like
there should
3
be more
months,
respect.
like that. Yeah, no, I agree.
And more respect for them. But if they do this, I think that even people who are rightfully so very critical of the police would also have more respect for them.
Yeah. Okay, so conclusion.
The conclusion is there's a couple. Words aren't what people often think they are. You got to be more thoughtful of words.
Okay.
You have to look at the data. You have to trust each other that the baseline is no one wants to kick a baby in the face, and that we're all actually doing a pretty good job by each other, and let's find ways to find reasons to have more respect for each other across political, educational, and professional divides.
Right.
And I don't mean to sound so rosy, but I think that is so needed, and it will help everybody. Right now, we see demons in each other, and we're looking for evil ghosts, where that's not the point. We should be looking for individual actions that need to be dealt with, but otherwise, we need to treat people like people and respect them more, whoever they are.
Awesome. All right, well, I enjoyed your perspective. Very, very positive.
I don't mean to be so positive.
No, it's good because it's definitely different from like a lot of other people, at least like that I've talked, and the media for sure. I mean, people are very negative. It's kind of.
You don't need to be. There's some damn wonderful cops driving around right now.
Yeah, I know.
But you know what? There's also some damn wonderful gang members.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sounds, it's true. And the ones who are bad, let's find a way to educate them out of being bad. Or, I mean, deal with them in harsher ways if we have to.